And now for part two of my interview with the Prime Minister, we turned our attention to foreign affairs and began in the United States. Ron DeSantis is out of the Republican primaries. Donald Trump had that decisive win in Iowa. Looks lay down misere for the nomination, it seems. Are you relaxed as our national leader? Are you relaxed either way on the outcome of what happens in November in the United States?
Well, what's important is that we respect democratic processes, and the United States is a nation of which we have no closer ally. I have a good relationship, obviously, with President Biden, but we respect those democratic processes in the United States. We'll deal with whatever the outcome.
Could you work with Donald Trump?
We'll work with whatever the outcome is, because the relationship between Australia and the United States is not just a relationship between individuals or leaders. It's a relationship between our peoples, and it's based upon the democratic values that we share, the cause of freedom that we have fought for together, and that's why the relationship is so strong. I've developed a very close personal relationship with President Biden. I have had a range of face-to-face meetings, but also discussions with him on the phone. We're working together as well, closely in areas like climate change.
But he supports alliances. Donald Trump was much less predictable when it comes to alliances. I just wonder, do you have some concern about whether or not he sticks to AUKUS, for example?
No, well, I'm not going to preempt the democratic processes in the United States. I would say that the relationship that we have with the United States has never been stronger. The AUKUS relationship is quite extraordinary. You'd recall, Kieran, a range of front-page stories across newspapers questioning whether the AUKUS legislation would go through the US Congress. Well, that happened last year. We also have had a very successful state visit. We're working on areas like critical minerals and dealing with the challenge of climate change. We're working together on the Quad in the region, and we have a very close relationship, and that's a good thing.
On China, Nauru has established diplomatic relations now with China, recognising Beijing removing its recognition of Taiwan. Is the government confident it can ensure diplomatic ties don't extend then to a security arrangement between Nauru and China like we saw with the Solomons?
Look, Nauru is entitled, as other sovereign nations, to determine who they recognise, and we, of course, have a bipartisan one China policy here in Australia that is long-standing. But we have re-engaged with the Pacific family. We've treated them with respect. We want to be the national security partner of choice. We've seen that with the work that we've done in the Pacific Island Forum, with the landmark agreement that we set with Tuvalu, with the agreement that we signed right here in December with Papua New Guinea. The Prime Minister, James Marape, will be the first leader of Papua New Guinea to address the Australian Parliament on February 8. That will be a very significant event and signifies the importance of those ties with our region.
On to Ukraine. We see in the Nine papers today, Ukraine has upped its appeal for a humanitarian shipment of Australian thermal coal. We saw a similar one back in 2022 under the former coalition government. Are you supportive of sending some coal to Ukraine to help them keep their power going?
No, well, we give appropriate consideration to all requests. We do that in a way that is diplomatic and gives proper consideration to it. But we are already very significant contributors to the Ukrainian efforts to defend their sovereignty and to defend their democracy. We have been very clear with measures of economic support, with the training just last week. A range of Australian soldiers headed to the United Kingdom to do further training of the Ukrainians in order to assist the war effort that they're engaged in. We'll continue to engage in a mature, considered way with Ukraine, and we stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes.
And in this energy request, are you open to that?
Well, we make decisions based upon a considered response. We've received a request, but there was a different request a week ago.
Yeah.
So
on the Taipans, the helicopters.
So
why do we not send those?
Because we take proper advice from the Australian Defence Force, and we give appropriate consideration to all of these requests.
On to the Middle East, just finally, we'll finish on this one, because I know that anyone that has seen your political career knows you have an extensive involvement with many multicultural communities. And from my experience, I haven't seen a conflict like this where it's got so many Australians so heavily invested, both at a personal level with relatives caught up either in Israel, Gaza or southern Lebanon. What's your, as a national leader, as our national leader, how do you reflect on that, given so many Australians are so heavily invested, feel so much about the trauma they see day to day out of the Middle East?
A big challenge for Australia is to make sure that we remain a cohesive society, that we don't bring anger and conflicts here, that we continue to give respect to people regardless of their faith, regardless of their ethnicity and their backgrounds. Now, that can be very difficult. I know that for the Jewish community after the October 7 terrorist attack by Hamas have been feeling very vulnerable. For many members of the Palestinian and Islamic communities who have relatives in Gaza as well, it's a very difficult time. So we need to acknowledge that. It's also the case that for some, we need to make sure that we respond in an appropriate way. Call out anti-Semitism when we see it, call out Islamophobia when we see it as well. And I have continued to engage with people who are affected by this, and I know that the concerns are very legitimate. But I want social cohesiveness here to be an absolute priority, and for us to continue to be prepared to have respectful debates, and I know that that is something that has been an absolute priority for me.
Let's hope that those respectful debates continue in this great country. Prime Minister, I very much appreciate your time to start the year. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Kieran, and welcome back.